How do traumatic events affect an individual's resilience by Avery H. What does it mean to be resilient? The true definition of resilience is the psychological capacity to adapt to stressful situations and bounce back from adverse events. As mentioned in the definition, resilient individuals can conquer their traumatic events and the ups and downs of life. Resilience isn't something that people have or don't have, but rather a skill that is learned and developed throughout different stages of life. Trauma can be categorized very differently for each individual. It's defined as an incident or series of events that are emotionally disturbing or life-threatening with lasting adverse events on the individual's functioning, mental, physical, social, emotional, and or spiritual well-being. Traumatic events are categorized into three groups: acute, chronic, and complex. The interpretation of the events are different for each individual. Children experience behavior problems while adults experience exhaustion. No individual is limited to these symptoms, however, they are found to be the most common. Acute trauma. Acute trauma is caused by a single event such as sexual assaults, mass shootings, or car crashes. This form is sudden and unpredictable, and it is not known to have long-lasting side effects. However, it may cause short-term post-traumatic stress disorder, or otherwise known as PTSD. PTSD has the possibility of making it harder for the individual to feel resilience due to the thought of future stressors. Risk factors of complex symptoms after acute trauma include being female, having close proximity to the event, lacking support and resources. New coping skills and sense of meaning can contribute to strengthening an individual's resilience after acute traumatic event. A story that represents this form of trauma is the story of Aliyah, who survived the Parkland, Florida school shooting. Eastman was a student at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School when Nicholas Cruz opened fire on students and staff. Eastman was fighting for her life while watching friends and classmates die in front of her. Eastman stated, "I witnessed 6 of my classmates get shot and 2 being murdered." After the shootings, she went on to speak to politicians and crowds about her trauma. By doing this, Eastman grew her resilience and made the best of the situation by enlightening people on the gravity of the school shootings in the United States. Chronic trauma. Chronic trauma refers to a repeated prolonged traumatic event. Examples include war or combat, community violence, or homelessness. Chronic trauma may lead to long-term effects that can have an effect on mental, emotional, and physical health. Children exposed to chronic trauma may have an increased likelihood of developing mental disorders, and mothers who are exposed have the likelihood of developing brain changes associated with how they process empathy. Reactions to chronic trauma may be aided through therapy, discussion with friends and family, and other resources. Doing these remedies may increase and strengthen individuals' resilience along the way. The migrant mother. A strong example of chronic trauma is the migrant mother, and more specifically, the Great Depression. The woman's name was Florence Owens Thompson, a mother of 7 who lost her house in Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl. The image represents poverty, hunger, and hopelessness, which citizens endured during the scary time of the Great Depression. Despite the feeling of sorrow when looking at the image, the meaning behind the photo is very powerful. The mother is extremely resilient. It is clear by her posture and facial expressions. Florence's head is held high and strong, while her 2 children climb into her arms to feel a sense of relief and security. The image accurately depicts the resilience and strength of ordinary Americans during the time of the Great Depression. Complex trauma. Complex trauma is defined as the exposure to multiple, often interrelated forms of traumatic experiences and the difficulties that arise as a result of adapting to or surviving these experiences. These events can cause a great deal of suffering due to the longevity of the event. In most cases, complex trauma often begins in the early stages of childhood or adolescence. Children's brains are not fully developed and cannot comprehend traumatic events, which makes it increasingly difficult to overcome. Complex trauma could have a side effect on an individual's resilience after experiencing it due to the inability to cope with stress and ongoing fear that the event may happen again. Maintaining healthy relationships, focusing on self-worth, and discussing problems with a trusted adult or friend are all ways to strengthen your resilience after a complex event. Long walk to freedom. Long Walk to Freedom, excerpt from Chapter 6 by Nelson Mandela, is a powerful story of overcoming hardships and complex situations. Throughout Mandela's time in jail, he was able to overcome difficult situations and build up resilience while finding routines and purpose in hope of making the time go faster. Mandela said, authorities attempted to exploit every weakness, demolish every initiative, and negate all signs of individuality with the idea of stamping out the spark that makes each of us human. I don't know what I could have done if I had been alone. Mandela's resilience was not only strengthened on his own, but rather with the help of friends who shared the same values and determination to make it out of jail with sanity. Mandela's resilience enabled him to endure the complex trauma of being in prison. Conclusion. Acute, chronic, and complex trauma do not have limits or expectations. Every traumatic experience is portrayed differently by each individual. It must be known that the three forms of trauma can certainly affect an individual and their resilience in a negative or positive way. However, with the support and help from others, resilience may be developed and strengthened over time.
Okay, thank you. A couple of questions. How did your research question evolve as you moved through the research process?
My question evolved as I began analyzing the two artifacts, the Migrant Mother and the Long Walk to Freedom. Having a deeper understanding of the Migrant Mother and the Long Walk to Freedom aided in finding the research that supported their traumatic experiences, and I was able to connect my research based on their experiences.
Okay, thank you. What additional questions emerged from your research, and why are they important?
I would like to know more about if resilience wasn't strengthened throughout traumatic experiences, would an individual be more susceptible to an additional trauma in the future? And this question is important because it can show the necessity of growing resilience.
Okay.